you grew up in. As a child, who were the most important adults in your life?
Okay.
Describe something that scared you as a child. What kind of a student were you? Who was your favorite teacher and why? What do you remember about your first job?
I start off.
Yeah.
I remember my first job basically because I was just qualified and I was given the job of the principal of a school who decided to retire. And so I had the unfortunate position of having to be the principal when most of the teachers in the school who'd been employed for a long time were much older than me and much more experienced, but unfortunately they didn't have my qualifications. So it was a real learning curve, and I'm very grateful for it because it taught me interpersonal skills of how to keep people happy, which was a big job. And I enjoyed it and was very satisfied with it, and was offered, when I had to move to a new town in South Africa where I come from, I was offered a principal position right away again.
What did you do after high school, and what was that time like?
That was really the best.
Briefly describe your ancestry.
Oh, I pressed the button.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. Whatever question you want to answer.
Okay. I come from Russian parents who escaped persecution in Russia and came to South Africa. I was born in South Africa and lived there for 72 years. And I can describe that as the Chinese curse, that may you live in interesting times, because I lived through the apartheid era as an activist, so there were many times where I had to hide. Okay.
What was the most shocking news story you remember hearing as a child? Who's the most famous person you've ever met?
I was very privileged to meet Mandela, who for me has been, I always thought he was the Messiah coming back, because he was the most incredible man, most living after spending 27 years in jail, not coming out angry or hostile or resentful, most forgiving, loving man, and I respected him greatly and was only sad that he could only be president for 2 years, because for those 2 years, South Africa was utopia.
What would be your perfect meal? Describe a perfect Saturday afternoon. List a few of your habits that annoy other people.
I don't know if it annoys other people, but I basically am a storyteller, and I garrulous and I talk too much.
What would you do differently if you had more self-discipline?
I wouldn't eat everything that I love and overindulge.
What do you fear?
At this stage of my life, I'm not afraid of dying, but I'm afraid of being dependent. I've always been a hugely independent person, and the thought of not being able to look after myself or take care of myself or be immobilized is my greatest fear.
If you could travel anywhere for free, where would you go? If you could watch just one movie again and again, what would it be? What do you like best about yourself?
I like the fact that I I really was a very painfully shy child. I grew up really under my mother's wing, who was a control freak. So when I look back, I realized that she would have even told me when to breathe. But what I've overcome, I've not overcome it or got rid of it, but basically I'm still shy, but no one wants to believe it. Because basically I've learned to handle my shyness, and I'm outgoing and confident, or give that impression now.
If you had all the money in the world, where would you live? Name one great smell.
I've always loved perfume, and I have 2 or 3 that are my favorites. And my children always say, when we were living a great distance from each other, that every time they passed someone who was wearing my perfume, my daughter specifically said she used to burst into tears. So I still love perfume, and it's become a ritual to wear it when I dress, as part of my dressing ritual.
Where do you believe we go when we die?
I do believe in reincarnation, and I do believe there are different levels, possibly the Buddhist thought. I'm not religious, I'm very spiritual. I believe one comes back to life to learn. We're here to learn lessons. When we learn lessons, we go to a different level. If we don't learn them, we have to come back and try again. And then we move from level to level until we reach nirvana.
If you could relive one moment in your life, which one would it be?
Giving birth. I gave birth to 3 children, and those 3 experiences were the best in my life, and I was lucky enough to not suffer too much pain or trauma.
If money were no object, what would you buy?
I would make sure that every single child in the world is cared for. Children have always been my passion. In fact, my profession is early childhood education, and I would make sure that every child was nurtured and cared for and had enough food to eat.
What was your all-time favorite TV show?
Jeopardy.
What was the most memorable concert you ever saw?
I happened to be privileged to listen to Zubin Mehta as the conductor. I love classical music, and of course the name's now gone. The violinist, who's handicapped, who sits in a wheelchair. The name is just gone. Well, that's part of my story. I don't remember what I had for breakfast. But it was the most amazing, uplifting Beethoven's 5th symphony I have ever heard in my life, and I love classical music.
If you could bring someone back from the dead, who would it be?
Probably Mandela, because I know that he would save South Africa, which is apparently going down the tubes.
How do you feel about flying, and how do you prepare for a trip?
I used to be rather tense and stressed and afraid. I am far more comfortable now about flying. Unfortunately, I have a problem. I can't fly very often. In fact, I was told by doctors I should not fly again because I tend to make embolisms. So I'm apparently grounded now, but I'm grateful that I managed to do a lot of traveling in my youth, and I saw a great part of the world. And when I prepare for a trip, I probably still hope that it isn't the pilot's time, because when I told my mother, I believe that you die when it's your time, she said, what would you do if it was the pilot's time? So I learned a lesson there.
Do you believe in psychics or the supernatural?
Yes, I do. I'm psychic myself. I'm very spiritual. My psychic abilities make me sometimes afraid, but I've had too many experiences not to believe in in not so much the supernatural as much as there is another level of living.
What's the best dish you can prepare from scratch?
It is a lemon meringue, very, very popular, and every time I'm invited out somewhere and offered to do something, the request is always for the lemon meringue, so I obviously make a good one.
Describe a family tradition you remember fondly.
Okay, the family traditions were always festivals that we celebrated, and being Jewish, it's usually around food, apart from all the other things. But the most favorite one of mine was always the Passover Seder. We would be 40, maybe more people. I come from a very big extended family, and I carried on that tradition when I had my own home, and would be thrilled to be able to have and enjoyed preparing all that I had to prepare for those occasions.
What was the best phone call you ever received?
I received, I trained after I am a qualified specialist in early childhood education and lectured at the university in South Africa in those subjects in the special education department. But the best phone call I ever received was when I was studying to become a marriage counselor. And I was told that since my early childhood was not a degree, and this was a postgraduate course, I would not be able to actually practice counseling. So I said, well, I'm counseling parents all the time anyway, and I'd like to know that I'm doing it professionally and I know what I'm doing. So I did the course anyway. And I did graduate, and I graduated almost at the top of the class. And I thanked everyone and went home, and I was sitting in my office as I was a principal of the school then, and I got a phone call. And someone said on the other end of the line, "Are you Dolly Britton, the marriage counselor?" And I said, well, I am a marriage counselor, but I don't have the qualification. I do have the qualifications, I don't have the degree. And I heard this giggling at the other end of the phone, and it happened to be the director of the course of marriage counseling that I did at UNISA in the South Africa University. And she laughed and said, "Oh, well, Dolly, you are qualified, and we are recognizing it because I put your case before the board, and they said, we have to accept you. We can't lose someone as valuable as you. And you can now open a practice." And I had a practice in South Africa for 43 years, apart from everything else I did.
What was the best road trip you ever took?
Many.
Who's your favorite movie actor and actress?
Richard Gere and Meryl Streep.
What's the most daring adventure you've ever been on?
Okay, it wasn't really an adventure, but I qualified after Mandela was released. 150 people from all the main cities in South Africa were chosen to do a course in diversity, basically to help white people live with colored or black people. In fact, it was diversity anti-racism training. And we were taken into to do the course at a very remote place in South Africa. It was actually a resort, but it was remote. There was no TV, there was no telephone, but there were a lot of snakes and spiders and insects. In fact, I showered every day with a very friendly frog. And I found that adventure really, really not stressful, but an adventure.
How much are you bothered by growing older?
I don't mind growing older. I do believe I'm going to be 81 tomorrow, so I don't know if I'm growing older. I think I am old, but I don't. I think it's just a number. Whenever I'm still active to where my body allows me to be active. I wake up with a 20-year-old mind and a 120-year-old body. But I try to do as much as I can, and I hope I'll be able to do it for as long as I can. What bothers me most of all is becoming dependent and losing my independence and losing my dignity.
Name all the pets you've ever had.
Well, you're going to need at least an hour or I am, because we were called the branch of the Boswell Wilkie Circus. We were always, my husband and I was married for 52 years in South Africa, and we always had animals. We bred Great Danes. The male was called Caesar, the female Clytemnestra. She gave birth to 13 puppies. We had every animal you can imagine, not wild animals, but we did have the odd snake, but they were mostly pets. But they were a really important part of my life. And if I was to, we had a Russian wolfhound called, she was a Borzoi, and she was called Tsarina. And we had two Maltese poodles. One was called Tiger because he was very aggressive and thought he was a Great Dane. The other one was called Snowy. We had two guinea pigs called Max and Morris. We had a little white mouse called Anatole. We had a budgerigar that was called Cheeky Boy. And I'm 81. I don't remember what I had for breakfast. So I can't remember all of them. There were too many.
What clothing item did you love so much you wore it too often?
I have never been very much of a shopper or worried about clothes. I remember my sister saying to me, if you wear that outfit one more time, when I see you, we are going shopping for sure. So I'm very comfortable with most of the clothes that I have. I like to look nice, but it isn't a be-all and end-all of my life.
Do you ever swear? If so, what's your favorite curse word?
Really? Okay, I do tend to suffer from road rage. I'm told I have a lead foot. I seem to drive too fast, and I get very angry, and my favorite word starts with an F. I feel very good after I say that one.
How have your priorities changed in your life?
I've changed to the degree where I now can say no. I tend to be a very caring, nurturing person. I love people, but there are situations now where I can say no, and I reckon I've earned my place in the sun and kind of sit and relax when I feel like it. I didn't even read that one.
We're about out of time, so one last question. How would you like to be remembered?
Well, I think I have impacted on many, many lives and changed many lives of unhappy and disadvantaged people. I'm very satisfied with how hard I worked and how much I did to improve the lives of many, many children in South Africa who were hungry and disadvantaged, and I think and I hope I'll be remembered for that.
Thank you for visiting.